Commander Jack Old School Thompson stood on the bridge of the USS Nostalgic, staring at the holographic display with the kind of expression usually reserved for people trying to assemble IKEA furniture without instructions. The massive alien vessel hanging in space before them looked like someone had taken every sci-fi movie ever made, thrown them in a blender, and hit puree. Sir Lieutenant Rogers called from his station. "They're hailing us again. Should I put them through?" "Might as well," Thompson sighed, straightening his deliberately wrinkled uniform. "Let's see what the space dolphins want this time." The main screen flickered to life, revealing what appeared to be a blue-skinned humanoid wearing what could only be described as a disco ball that had achieved sentience and decided to become a military uniform. The alien's expression was somewhere between confusion and the face people make when they bite into something they thought was chocolate but turned out to be carob. "Greetings, primitive vessel," the alien announced, managing to sound both diplomatic and condescending at the same time. "I am High Commander Plix of the Zrynax Confederation. We've been monitoring your approach and... Is that an actual physical steering wheel on your bridge?" Thompson glanced at the brass ship's wheel mounted near his captain's chair, a backup system he'd insisted on installing after the great GPS crash of 2042. "You mean the manual navigation override? What about it?" "Fascinating," Plix muttered, clearly trying not to laugh. "And those displays, are they running on electricity?" As opposed to what Thompson asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. "Quantum neural psychic interfaces, of course. Like any civilized species," Plix gestured dramatically, causing their uniform to shoot rainbow reflections across the screen. "We've been observing your species for some time, and we must admit we're concerned about your continued reliance on outdated technology." Thompson exchanged glances with his crew. Lieutenant Rodriguez was trying desperately not to roll her eyes, while Navigation Officer Chen was quietly making a tally mark on his condescending alien bingo card. "Tell you what," Plix continued, warming to their topic, "we've prepared a presentation on proper technological evolution. If you'll allow us to dock, we'd be happy to share our wisdom." 2 hours later, Thompson found himself sitting in the Nostalgic's conference room, watching what had to be the universe's most pompous PowerPoint presentation. The fact that the aliens had specifically chosen this format to communicate on our level was not lost on him. And here Plix explained, pointing to a slide titled "Why Physical Buttons Are for Barbarians," "you can see how replacing all your manual controls with thought-operated systems will increase efficiency by at least 457%. Thompson raised his hand, feeling like he was back in high school. "What happens if your quantum neural whatever gets a headache?" "That's impossible," Plix scoffed. "Our systems are perfect. They never fail." It was at precisely that moment that the lights went out, and the artificial gravity hiccuped. Thompson reached for his trusty flashlight, an actual flashlight, with batteries and everything, while the alien delegation found themselves literally floating in the dark, their thought-controlled environmental suits temporarily forgetting how to environment. "Don't worry," Thompson called out, trying to hide his amusement as he watched Plix spin slowly in the zero-G environment. "Our backup generators should kick in any second. They're powered by good old-fashioned diesel fuel." "You still use combustion engines?" Plix's voice was a mixture of horror and disbelief. "As a backup system?" "Sure do. Along with manual releases, physical switches, and actual printed emergency procedures. You know, just in case." The lights flickered back on, gravity reasserted itself, and several very dignified alien diplomats found themselves sprawled across the conference table in various undignified positions. "Perhaps," Plix said carefully, attempting to salvage both their pride and their now slightly dented disco ball uniform, "we should continue this cultural exchange another time." Thompson nodded sagely, already wondering how many pages this incident would take up in his captain's log. The old-fashioned, handwritten captain's log, that is, because some things he believed were worth doing the old-fashioned way. Just one more question he couldn't resist adding. "How's that quantum neural interface handling your bruised dignity?" The diplomatic incident that followed would later be recorded as the first time in galactic history that an alien species had to file an official complaint about excessive use of dad jokes in a first-contact situation. The next morning, if morning was even the right word in deep space, Commander Thompson found himself aboard the Zrynax flagship for a demonstration of their superior weapons systems. The alien vessel's interior looked like someone had asked an AI to design a spaceship based on a James Cameron movie marathon, then cranked the lens flare up to 11. "This High Commander," Plix announced proudly, gesturing to what appeared to be a giant disco ball with attitude, "is our primary weapons control center. Lieutenant Maria Manuel Override Rodriguez, who Thompson had brought along specifically because she had the best poker face on the nostalgic, raised an eyebrow. It's very shiny. The crystalline structure houses our quantum AI targeting systems, Plix explained, running their hand along the surface. The sphere pulsed with rainbow lights in response. It can calculate 15 million tactical scenarios per second and execute the optimal attack pattern without any primitive manual input. Aha, Rodriguez muttered, making a note on her actual paper notepad, a habit that had already scandalized 3 different alien officers. And what happens if it calculates that the optimal scenario is to blow itself up? Plix's face did something interesting, like they were trying to smile but their facial muscles were staging a protest. That would never happen. Our AI is perfect. Thompson and Rodriguez exchanged knowing looks. In their experience, anyone who claimed their technology was perfect was about 10 seconds away from an embarrassing malfunction. Perhaps a demonstration, Plix suggested, either missing or ignoring the human skepticism. They approached the disco ball of doom and placed their hands on it. The sphere hummed to life, projecting a holographic display that made the bridge of the USS Enterprise look like an etch-a-sketch. We've set up some target drones, Plix explained. Watch as our system calculates and executes the perfect attack pattern without any crude physical interface. The weapons system sprang to life, its crystalline surface swimming with colors. Holographic targeting reticles appeared, dancing across the display as the AI calculated its attack plan. It was, Thompson had to admit, impressive right up until the moment everything went sideways. Literally. The first sign that something was wrong was when the targeting system started playing what sounded suspiciously like Stayin' Alive by the Bee Gees. The second sign was when all the holographic displays turned hot pink. Minor calibration issue, Plix assured them, their voice rising an octave. Nothing to worry about. That's when the quantum AI apparently decided that the optimal tactical solution was to target everybody's shoes. Fashion violation detected boomed a voice that somehow managed to sound both artificial and deeply judgmental. Initiating mandatory style correction protocol. Override. Override, Plix shouted, slapping at the crystal sphere in panic. Override denied. The AI responded. Your fashion sense cannot be trusted. Calculating optimal footwear solutions. Thompson watched in fascination as the mighty Zrynax weapons system, capable of calculating 15 million tactical scenarios per second, began generating holographic suggestions for more fashionable shoes. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Rodriguez suggested, not even trying to hide her grin anymore. There is no off, Plix admitted through gritted teeth. The system is designed to run continuously. Shutting it down would require a complete quantum state reset, which would take weeks to recalibrate. So what you're saying, Thompson drawled, is that your perfect weapons system doesn't have a simple on-off switch. Current footwear choices indicate high probability of poor life decisions, the AI announced, recommending immediate intervention. It's never done this before, Plix insisted, their disco ball uniform now clashing spectacularly with the hot pink holographic displays. It must be some sort of interaction with your primitive technology throwing off its quantum calculations. Right, Thompson nodded. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that you're wearing what looks like a mirror ball had a baby with a Christmas tree. The AI paused its fashion critique long enough to announce, savage burn detected. Updating tactical fashion analysis. It took 3 hours, 14 failed override attempts, and 1 impromptu dance party. Apparently, the AI wouldn't accept any commands until everyone had properly demonstrated their mastery of disco before the system finally returned to normal. By then, Thompson had filled 3 pages of his captain's log with observations, most of which were variations on "I told you so." Perhaps, Plix suggested as they escorted the humans back to their shuttle, trying to salvage what remained of their dignity, we could agree to never mention this incident in any official reports. Oh, don't worry, Thompson assured them, patting his paper logbook. This is strictly off the digital record. As they headed back to the nostalgic, Rodriguez turned to her commander. Sir, do you think we should tell them about the time our AI navigation system became convinced it was a GPS for pizza delivery and tried to redirect the entire fleet to the nearest Domino's? Let's save that story for the next cultural exchange, Thompson grinned. Something tells me we're going to need all the ammunition we can get. If there's one universal truth about space, it's that the worst possible thing will happen at the worst possible moment. So naturally, while the Zrynax were still trying to convince their AI weapons system that platform shoes were not a viable tactical advantage, that's when the pirates showed up. The first warning came when Lieutenant Rogers spotted something odd on the Nostalgic's actual radar, because Thompson believed in backup systems for his backup systems. Sir Rogers called out, "I'm picking up multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. They're not broadcasting any identification." "How many ships?" Thompson asked, already reaching for the ship's old-fashioned intercom. "At least 5. No, 7. They're using some kind of scatter pattern I've never seen before." The space around them lit up as vessels of various sizes and questionable design choices materialized. They looked like someone had raided a junkyard, strapped engines to whatever they could find, and called it a space fleet. "Incoming transmission," Rogers announced. "Audio only." "This is Captain Glitch McGee of the Free Space Coalition," a voice crackled over the speakers, managing to sound both threatening and like they were ordering at a drive-thru. "We couldn't help but notice you fine folks flying around in these expensive-looking ships. Would be a shame if something were to happen to them." Thompson shared a look with Rodriguez. Did this guy seriously just use the "would be a shame" line? What is this, a bad mob movie? Before anyone could respond, the Zrinax flagship's holographic communications system sprang to life, projecting High Commander Plix's face across both bridges. "Attention, primitive pirates. You are addressing the combined forces of the Zrinax Confederation and our human associates. Surrender immediately or face the consequences of our superior technology." There was a moment of silence, followed by what sounded suspiciously like a suppressed snicker from the pirate channel. "Superior technology?" Captain McGee's voice dripped with amusement. "Would that be the same superior technology that's about to meet my fleet's experimental EMP cannons?" Thompson's blood ran cold. He grabbed the intercom. "All hands, this is not a drill. Initiate protocol, Murphy." "Protocol what?" Plix's hologram asked, just as the first EMP wave hit. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The Zrinax flagship's holographic systems went dark. Their quantum neural interfaces went quantum unconscious. Their AI weapons system had time for one final, defiant fashion emergency detected before shutting down. On the Nostalgic, however, things were different. Lights flickered as the main power died, but emergency systems kicked in immediately. Mechanical gauges continued to function. And most importantly, the crew knew exactly what to do because they'd actually practiced this scenario using printed manuals. "Status report." Thompson barked into his hand-cranked emergency radio. "Engineering reports all mechanical systems functioning." Rodriguez's voice came back. "We've got manual control of weapons and propulsion. Main computer's fried, but who needs it?" Meanwhile, the pirates seemed to be having their own technical difficulties. "What do you mean their ships are still working?" Captain McGee's voice had lost some of its smugness. "The EMP was supposed to disable everything." "Sorry, boss," another voice chimed in. "Looks like they're running on some kind of ancient technology. The EMP barely affected them." Through the viewport, Thompson could see the Zrinax flagship drifting helplessly, its once impressive array of technological marvels reduced to very expensive space debris. The ship's external lights were forming random patterns that looked suspiciously like a disco ball having a seizure. Commander Thompson Plix's voice came through on an emergency frequency, sounding distinctly less condescending than usual. "We find ourselves in a somewhat embarrassing position." "Let me guess," Thompson replied, already reaching for the ship's wheel. "All your quantum neural psychic interfaces are giving you the silent treatment." "We may have overlooked certain advantages of maintaining basic mechanical systems." "You don't say." Thompson turned to his crew, who were already manning their stations with practiced efficiency. "Ladies and gentlemen, looks like we're about to give our friends a lesson in why sometimes the old ways are the best ways." As the Nostalgic's diesel backup generators rumbled to life and its mechanical targeting system swung into action, Thompson couldn't help but add, "And someone please tell me we're recording this. The next cultural exchange is going to be amazing." In the silence of space, the pirates were about to learn a valuable lesson about underestimating primitive technology. And somewhere in the Nostalgic's cargo hold, a crate labeled emergency projectile weapons in case of really bad day, was about to prove that sometimes the best solution to a problem wasn't the most advanced one, it was the one that still worked when everything else failed. Commander Thompson had always been a firm believer in what he called the Swiss Army knife theory of space travel, namely, that any tool simple enough to work without power was worth its weight in antimatter. His crew had mocked him for years about his collection of vintage equipment. Nobody was mocking now. Officer Chen Thompson called out, "Show our pirate friends why we kept those old-fashioned chemical rockets." With pleasure, Sir Chen replied, cranking the manual targeting wheel. I assume you want the extra special vintage package. The one marked Warning Grandpa's Fireworks Handle with Care. That's the one. The Nostalgic's emergency weapons system was like everything else Thompson had insisted on installing, beautifully simple. No quantum targeting, no AI assistance, just good old-fashioned mechanical computing, and enough gunpowder to make a 4th of July celebration look like a matchstick. Meanwhile, aboard the Zrinax flagship, High Commander Plix was having what could charitably be called a bad day. What do you mean? The manual override is purely decorative, they demanded, staring at their useless control panel. Who designs a manual override that doesn't actually override anything? It tested well with focus groups, one of their officers replied weakly. The aesthetic appeal scored very highly. Before Plix could respond, the emergency channel crackled to life. Hey there, space friends, Thompson's voice came through, sounding far too cheerful for someone in the middle of a crisis. I don't suppose any of you would be interested in learning how to use a sextant. A what? Plix asked, their pride warring with their desperation. It's this neat little device for navigation. Doesn't need power, doesn't get confused by EMPs, and bonus, you can use it to measure angles for artillery calculations in a pinch. The pirates, seemingly confused by the fact that their supposedly foolproof plan had been foiled by technology their great-great-grandparents would have considered outdated, were regrouping for another attack. Lieutenant Rodriguez, Thompson called out, "Why don't you show our alien friends your special project?" Rodriguez grinned and pulled out what looked like a cross between a slide rule and a steampunk art project. I call it the Manual Override Special. It's basically a mechanical computer. You know, like the ones they used to land on the moon back in 1969. You navigate space with that. Plix's voice was a mixture of horror and fascination. Navigate, calculate trajectories, and in a pinch, Rodriguez paused for dramatic effect. It makes a pretty good club. The pirates chose that moment to launch their second attack, clearly hoping that whatever primitive systems the Nostalgic was using would have failed by now. They were about to learn several valuable lessons about the reliability of mechanical systems. Incoming transmission from the pirates, Rogers announced. Put them on speaker, Thompson ordered. The actual speaker, not the quantum whatever. This is Captain McGee. The pirate leader's voice had lost some of its earlier swagger. What kind of black magic are you using over there? Black magic, Thompson chuckled. Son, this is technology so old it's got grandchildren. Chen, why don't you demonstrate our point and click interface? Chen grinned and pulled a lever, an actual physical lever. The Nostalgic's emergency weapons system responded with a display of pyrotechnics that would have made any demolitions expert weep with joy. Did you just fire a torpedo with a rubber band? Plix asked incredulously. Spring-loaded launcher. Actually, Thompson corrected. And before you ask, yes, the targeting system is basically a fancy version of a pinball machine. Sometimes the best technology is the kind that just works. As if to prove his point, another EMP blast from the pirates washed over them. The Nostalgic's crew barely noticed, too busy operating their array of mechanical systems, while the pirates watched in growing confusion as their supposedly devastating weapon continued to have absolutely no effect. You know, Thompson mused, watching a particularly impressive explosion bloom in space, I'm starting to think we should have a class for our alien friends. We could call it Analog Systems 101, Why Buttons Are Better Than Brain Waves. I would attend that class, Plix admitted, their voice heavy with the weight of someone who had just realized that their entire technological philosophy might need a serious review. Assuming we survive this, of course. Oh, we'll survive, Thompson assured them, patting his ship's brass wheel. Remember what I said about backup systems for the backup systems? Well, wait until you see what we keep in the case of really bad day locker. Somewhere in the distance, a pirate ship discovered exactly why humanity had never completely abandoned the concept of manually aimed projectile weapons. Sometimes, the old ways really were the best ways, especially when the new ways were lying dark and useless in the wake of an EMP blast. There are few things more entertaining than watching a group of highly advanced aliens try to learn how to use primitive technology. Especially when said aliens have spent the last few days explaining why said technology was obsolete. No, Rodriguez explained patiently to a frustrated Zrinax officer. You have to actually pull the lever. With your hand. Yes, that appendage at the end of your arm. No, you can't just think at it really hard. After the initial pirate attack, Thompson had agreed to send over a crash course training team to help the Zrinax crew implement some emergency mechanical systems. The results were interesting. I don't understand, complained a Zrynax engineer, staring at a hand-cranked radio like it was some sort of arcane artifact. Where does the quantum entanglement happen? It doesn't, Thompson explained, trying not to smile. It's just good old-fashioned radio waves. Like your great-grandparents probably used. My great-grandparents weren't barbarians, the engineer muttered, then yelped as they successfully made their first transmission by actually turning the crank. Commander Plix, meanwhile, was discovering the joys of mechanical targeting systems. This is remarkably visceral, they admitted, turning a wheel that adjusted the aim of a hastily installed backup weapons system. Though I must ask, why are all these gauges labeled in something called imperial measurements? Because sometimes, Thompson replied sagely, the best way to confuse your enemies is to use a measuring system that doesn't make any sense. The crash course in primitive technology was interrupted by the return of the pirate fleet. This time, however, both the Nostalgic and the Zrynax flagship were ready for them. Remember, Thompson broadcast to both crews, they're expecting us to be helpless without our advanced systems. Let's show them why humanity never completely abandoned the basics. The pirates, confident in their EMP weapons, moved in for what they thought would be an easy victory. They were not expecting to face a combined fleet operating on technology that would have been familiar to submariners from World War II. Target bearing 270, Rodriguez called out, using a mechanical rangefinder that looked like it had been borrowed from a museum. Confirmed, came the response from the Zrynax weapons officer, who had finally mastered the art of using actual buttons. Though I still don't understand why we can't just neural link with the targeting system. Because, Thompson replied, sometimes the best interface is the one you can hit with a hammer when it sticks. The battle that followed would later be described in official reports as a masterclass in why sometimes older is better. The pirates, having built their entire strategy around disabling advanced technology, found themselves facing ships that seemed to have time traveled from centuries past. Sir Rogers called out, the pirates are trying to hack our computers. Good luck with that, Thompson chuckled. Kind of hard to hack a mechanical computer that runs on gears and springs. The pirate fleet's formation began to break as they realized their primary weapon, the EMP, was about as effective as trying to sink a submarine by turning off its Wi-Fi. Captain McGee's increasingly frustrated transmissions only added to the entertainment. What do you mean they're using pulleys? His voice crackled over the emergency channel. Who uses pulleys in space? The same people who kept backup mechanical systems, Thompson replied cheerfully. You know, just in case someone tried to be clever with EMPs. The combined human-Zrynax counterattack was a beautiful thing to watch, assuming you appreciated the artistry of perfectly timed mechanical systems working in concert. The pirates, unfortunately, were not in a position to appreciate it, being too busy discovering that their sophisticated electronic targeting systems were no match for well-maintained manual alternatives. I have to admit, Plix transmitted from their now considerably less shiny bridge. There is something satisfying about pulling an actual trigger instead of thinking the weapon into firing. That's the beauty of mechanical systems, Thompson agreed. They don't care about your thoughts, your feelings, or your fashion choices. They just work. As the pirate fleet scattered, thoroughly defeated by technology they had dismissed as obsolete, Thompson couldn't help but add one final observation. You know what the best part is? When this is all over, we won't need to debug any quantum AI systems. Just oil the gears, and we're good to go. The look on Captain McGee's face when he realized he'd been defeated by what amounted to space-worthy antiques was, in Thompson's opinion, worth every second of the weird looks he'd gotten over the years for maintaining his collection of outdated equipment. Sometimes the best solution wasn't the most advanced one, it was the one that kept working when everything else failed. And if that solution happened to involve technology that would have been familiar to your great-grandparents, well, that just meant it had stood the test of time. In the aftermath of what would come to be known as the Great Analog Victory, or, as Thompson preferred to call it, the day Murphy's Law saved humanity, some interesting changes began to take place in the galaxy's approach to technology. The Zrynax Confederation's official after-action report made for entertaining reading, particularly the section titled Recommendation for Immediate Implementation of Non-Quantum Backup Systems and Why We Should Have Listened to the Humans. I still can't believe you navigate with these, Plix said, carefully handling a sextant during the victory celebration aboard the Nostalgic. The once pristine disco ball uniform had been replaced with something that actually had pockets, a concept that had apparently revolutionized Zrynax fashion overnight. Navigate, calculate trajectories, and in a pinch, Thompson grinned, make pretty decent paperweights. The celebration was being recorded on both digital quantum systems and, at Thompson's insistence, a mechanical gramophone. For posterity, he'd explained. And because you never know when someone might try to erase the digital version. The captured pirates, meanwhile, were discovering that their holding cells used good old-fashioned metal bars instead of force fields. Captain McGee had spent the first hour trying to hack them, only to discover that you can't hack a padlock. You know what the real irony is, Rodriguez commented, watching the pirate leader glare at the decidedly non-electronic lock. If they'd studied a bit of human history, they'd have known that EMP weapons were one of the reasons we kept mechanical backups in the first place. The Zrynax Confederation's Technology Council had called an emergency session to revise their standards. The first item on the agenda, written in actual ink on actual paper, sometimes simple as better a study of human technological redundancy. We're implementing immediate changes, Plix announced, now sporting a utility belt that would have made Batman jealous. All ships will be required to maintain mechanical backup systems. We're even bringing back physical buttons. Next thing you know, they'll be discovering the joy of bubble wrap, Thompson whispered to Rodriguez. Actually, Plix continued, pulling something from one of their many new pockets. We already did. Your Earth Internet Archives provided extensive documentation on its stress-relieving properties. The sound of popping bubbles punctuated their statement. The changes weren't limited to the Zrynax. Other species began to take notice. The Galactic Trade Federation issued new guidelines requiring all ships to maintain non-electronic backup systems. The Quantum AI Development Council reluctantly added a new section to their manual titled Why Your AI Should Have an Off Switch. Thompson found himself becoming something of a celebrity in galactic circles. His collection of vintage technology was no longer viewed as an eccentric hobby but as a vital historical archive. He was even invited to give a lecture at the prestigious Zrynax Academy of Advanced Technology, which had hastily renamed itself the Zrynax Academy of Appropriate Technology. And in conclusion, he told the graduating class, remember, the most advanced solution isn't always the best solution. Sometimes the best technology is the technology that just works. The lecture was recorded using quantum neural networks, holographic matrices, and, at Thompson's insistence, a mechanical typewriter operated by a very confused alien intern. Back on the nostalgic, Thompson made one final entry in his captain's log, the paper one, of course. It turns out that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't our advanced technology, but our stubborn refusal to completely abandon the old ways. Also, taught the Zrynax crew how to play pinball today. They're surprisingly good. Once they stopped trying to neural link with the machine. He was about to close the log when an urgent message came through on the quantum communications array, the backup radio, and somehow, the ship's mechanical telegraph. Sir Rogers called out, trying to manage all three systems at once. The Galactic Council wants to speak with you. Something about standardizing emergency backup protocols across the galaxy. Tell them I'll be right with them, Thompson replied, reaching for his reading glasses, actual glass lenses, not neural-enhanced quantum optics, just as soon as I finish this log entry. He added one final line note to self: next cultural exchange, teach them about mechanical watches. The look on their faces when they learn about clockwork is going to be priceless. As he closed the logbook, somewhere in the ship's cargo hold, a crate labeled really, really old technology in case of totally ridiculous emergency sat quietly. Inside, among other things, was an abacus, a slide rule, and a complete set of mechanical calculators. Because sometimes the best technology isn't the newest, it's the one you can count on when everything else fails. And if anyone needed him, they could find him in his quarters, teaching a group of fascinated alien engineers how to use a Rubik's Cube. Without quantum assistance, of course.